me.
All right, thanks, Jeff.
Good evening, Shufflebus Nation. What is up? It's your boy Jesse. As you can see, there is no Neil. He is having some technical difficulties with his at-home internet and cannot get connected to our Zoom call for some reason. So he is working through that now. Hopefully he'll be joining me here in just a few moments, and when he does, I'll be sure to change everything out. But just wanted to say happy holidays to everybody who's here tonight, and this is our last live stream of 2023. We always take the month of December off. Just an opportunity there. What's going on, Solmir? Good to see you. Let me know if I said that wrong. Solimir. Anyways, you can give me the enunciation in chat if you want, and I'll make sure I can get it right in the future. We got quite a bit to do. We've got Casey Kidd from the Forgeborn Finishing School joining us at the top of the hour. So we'll do our first hour show, and then Casey Kidd will join us, and I'm sure that conversation will take up the entirety of the rest of the show. Just a little preview of that conversation. We have been in discussions about competitive SoulForge a couple of weeks ago on the Forgeborn Finishing School. Casey Kidd and Core, who's in chat here with us, had a brief discussion, semi-brief discussion on their channel regarding SoulForge and whether or not it should be a best of three, especially as we move into the app. And I have some of my own reservations about that format in general, but I do generally agree with best of three is the best way to host a competitive game. So it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, and you'll get to hear my thoughts. We'll get to hear Neil's thoughts, and then also Core and Greg. I have a feeling, or Casey Kidd, excuse me. I have a feeling that I'm going to be the lone man out on my opinion, but that's okay. That happens quite a bit for me. I just know that there's things about it that I feel pretty strongly about, and it's not that I don't want SoulForge to be a best of three, so we'll definitely talk about it. So Lemur, okay, perfect. I want to just make sure I say it right when you hop in the stream. I try to do that whenever we get a new chatter or somebody that we haven't talked to consistently. So welcome to the stream, and welcome to the Shufflebus, and be sure to continue joining us in conversation. That's why we do this as a live stream. The other things that have kind of happened, we'll talk some news here. As you can see on the screen, I've got the Forge Guardian lore events that was announced, I believe yesterday, might have been Monday. I have to admit, I don't check the SoulForge site every day for news, so it might have been Monday that they dropped it. And it's an interesting concept, but it's pretty vague still, so we'll kind of break that down a little bit, but we might speculate a little bit on what that looks like. But I think this is kind of indicative of some things that we had heard from Alex at Gen Con in conversation with him regarding the player turnout for events. And so if you go back and you look at the Gen Con events, the least attended event for SoulForge at Gen Con was the World Championship. Now, it makes sense, right? World Championship had a gold deck standard requirement, which meant that, you had to have at least a silver deck to get in, which not everybody had. And then, obviously, it had a pretty hefty price tag of $50 for the event entry. Now, there was plenty of reason for that fee. I mean, the price support was incredible and very unique, and so I think at the end of the day, it made a lot of sense financially once you saw that. That just wasn't very well laid out by Stoneblade Entertainment at the time. So it was one of the criticisms we had about Gen Con, and it really, I think, ramped up their increased engagement with the community. So I think there was lots of positives that came from sort of those blunders that happened back then. But the most attended event was obviously the storyline event. The Gen Con storyline event was the most attended, and Sealed was second, and they were very close to equal. And I believe both of them had a little over 40 players. So obviously there's a huge sort of easy sights on your back to look at and say story and sealed are more interesting to a larger swath of the player base than some of the competitive constructed stuff is. So we'll kind of talk about that and what this Forge Guardian lore event looks like. Obviously, there are some pretty incredible Forge Guardians out there. I mean, I can think of two off the top of my head that I would be happy to participate in their events, and that's Jurch from Charge Plated Podcast, and then you've got Eli from More Than Most, who has his own Twitch channel. Both of those guys are just awesome humans, and I would be happy to participate in any of their events as a show of support. So you can probably imagine that Shufflebus will be covering these events from probably a player perspective when they come up, and then we'll talk more about how we're going to roll out some different stuff in 2024 as well. We're going to focus a lot, I think, on the sealed side of SoulForge in 2024. I just think it's an opportunity to bring more players into the fold. I think it's an opportunity to get people participating in the game, but also growing their collections at the same time, which is a critical part of being good at competitive SoulForge, is being able to identify good decks in your collection. And the more you play the game with sort of suboptimal decks, the more you kind of understand what makes the good decks good, and vice versa, because it's really difficult in this game to play a quote-unquote good deck because of the unique deck nature. So unless you have a link to that deck and you're going to play somebody else's deck just for the purposes of like understanding how it works, you're really sort of using your own collection to learn the game of SoulForge. And you may not possess, if you have a smaller SoulForge collection, you may not possess a deck that would be competitive at the highest levels of SoulForge. And that's okay. But playing sealed enables you to further your collection while playing the game, which is, I think, the best way you can do this. And it gives you an opportunity to see more combinations, more other stuff, and who knows, maybe you find something that the community hasn't found in the competitive environment yet. So that's going to be one of those things that you're going to see more sealed out of Shufflebus in 2024. We're really excited with the partnership that Stoneblade has provided us with to be able to provide that to you all. And, we'll continue to ramp up our organized play prize support structure and things like that as we go into the new year. And as you know, for those of you that participate in the SBI, there are promo prizes. We haven't delivered SBI prizes yet. It's not because we're purposely holding out. We are waiting for SBE to provide us with the promos that they agreed to print for us. And once we have those, then we'll ship everything out in one shot. I don't want to make split shipments if we can avoid it. So just know that that's coming. We're happy to talk more about that as we go forward, but obviously we'll keep you all in the loop through the live stream. And if they come in December, y'all, I'm not going to wait. I'll get them put together and shipped out in December. I just want you to know that that's why you haven't received any prizes yet, if you're wondering. Okay, still no Neil. I don't know if he's given up. Don't know if he's still in the process of rebooting everything. Not sure what the overall issue is here tonight, but maybe he's just trying to slack off on this last stream. We can all just type in Discord, Neil's a slacker. That's what we'll do. That's how we'll do it. So, speaking of Discord, if you're not in our Discord, you should join it. There's a link in the show description here. We have some conversations there, but obviously, if you want to participate in Shufflebus organized play, that's the only way to do it. So, you'll need to be in the Discord to participate in our future events. It's also where we announce all those events. So if you're, on the fence, you're thinking about maybe trying something like this in 2024, this is the place that you'll be able to stay up to date on those events and when they're coming. I'm hoping to, shortly after the first of the year, put out a calendar of all of the sealed events for the whole year, so that you can mark off your calendar, save the dates, do those things, and participate in as many of them as you so desire. So, we'll get those laid out over the next month or so. Neil and I will still be working behind the scenes here, just not actively streaming on the show for the month of December. So, I don't know what else we can do. So I'll just get into this Forge Guardian lore event. and we'll talk a little bit about what it's saying, and then hopefully Neil will be on by then, and we can have some additional conversations. So this came out November 21st. So actually, it came out before Thanksgiving. This tells you how often I check. I didn't check last week, to be honest. Didn't even know, because we did a show last week and I just played games with people. But Forge Guardian lore events. Starting very soon, the world of Solus will once again be shaped by you, the players of SoulForge Fusion. PAX Unplugged, which is coming up this weekend, will see our now famous storyline event return. Excuse me. But alongside this and into 2024, there's a new way for you to impact the story of Solus, Forge Guardian lore events. And they have this big, beautiful banner here. These events will be a mix of in-person and online events run by our very own Forge Guardians. There are 4 different events that each Forge Guardian can run, 1 per faction. So each Forge Guardian can do all 4 of these. They're not being assigned to individual Forge Guardians. So in theory, there could be hundreds of these next year and have some impact on how the story comes out. While the details of the event will be shrouded in an element of mystery until the first event, we are happy to share with you the summary of each event. So obviously, we don't have a lot to go from this, but what you can expect in storyline events is wild game-breaking game mechanics are really common, and so they can drastically shape how a game is played, and so it can be a great equalizer, and it can also it kind of takes the pressure off you needing to have a competitively strong deck, because maybe you just get a good storyline modifier that makes your deck sing where other decks wouldn't. So, and they seem to be actively designing those in ways in general. I'm going to say this in general, to not necessarily push strong decks even further. They kind of seem to know what the strong decks are, and they kind of shy away from that. Although there was one round at the Gen Con story that was like kind of bonkers crazy. With meta relevant decks for sure. So yeah, I mean, I think they're actively trying to pursue that though, which is great, because there was lots of times in the Gen Con story event where I was playing a pretty competitive list, and that list I just almost never used the abilities. Like I almost never had a reason to activate. In fact, I think I went the whole tournament without ever using any of the storyline event abilities. So I think that's a testament to, like, hey, if your deck is strong, these things aren't going to matter. But if maybe your deck's a little bit weaker, they could have a big impact. And so I think they've done a pretty good job overall in the design space on that. So the Iron Colt will continue this storyline, this news piece here. Within Bright Steel, the city of founders and towers, the Iron Colt, malevolent devotees of the Forgeborn Ironbeard, gains momentum, resulting in theft and upheaval. Players' crucial choice to embrace or challenge the cult will shape the destiny of the Aloyan people. Okay, so they're doubling down on this Ironbeard. It's interesting because I think if you play blue, Ironbeard is the least played of all the blues. I could be wrong on that, and maybe Neil will correct me. I see him coming in now.
Hello.
Hey, Neil. Welcome to the show. We're just breaking down this Forge Guardian lore event news right now. Newt says, "Oh, this is an article I still need to read." Thank you, Newt. I'm so happy I'm not the only one that missed this pre-Thanksgiving. Like,
I have no idea what this is either.
It came out on the 21st of November. Like, nobody seems to know it, but they like dropped the news article on their website on the 21st of November. And like, I mean, if Cardboard Newt doesn't know it exists, I mean, like, seriously, it pretty went pretty much under the radar. But basically what it is it's a continuation of the storyline events being led by Forge Guardians. So that's going to be like your Jurches and your Eli's, is what I mentioned to the team here.
Right.
And I think that's great. I think it's a great way to create engagement, and I think it has a lot of real positive outcomes for the game, where storyline events seem to be where the bulk of the player base is gravitating towards in the first place. So I think it's awesome to see some community-led storyline events. There's going to be 4 of them, and so I just got done reading the Iron Colt one, which was the Aloyan one, which there is like a cult called the Iron Colt, which is devotees to the Forgeborn Ironbeard, and they're apparently gaining momentum. But and I said that's kind of interesting, since Ironbeard Solimir is asking in chat, do most players choose their decks based on Forgeborn or the cards in the deck? I would say it's a combination of both, Solimir, but I would say you lean heavily on the deck quality first and Forgeborn second.
Yeah. It
Um,
as you get to like the very top, like small percentage of decks, like if you're looking for a deck or a half deck and you want like, you know, 5 of 10 cards to be specific cards you want or whatever, that's something that you can feasibly do. And you'll just kind of like fill the other 5 in with things that seem like they're good or synergistic, and you can kind of count the Forgeborn abilities as additional cards in your deck because they're rolled on a similar table.
mm-hmm.
Once you get to like the very, very top, like tippity top of the deck construction, and you're looking for, you know, 8 out of 10, 9 out of 10, 10 out of 10 decks, then you have to start counting the Forgeborn abilities among that. So it's almost like, you're looking for like 11 out of 13
Right.
things,
Yeah.
counting each. And obviously there are corner cases where like if you have specifically you're looking for Dark Forge Drain, for instance, or Army Commander type stuff, like then you're building around that specific piece. So then you're definitely looking for Forgeborn stuff. But for the most part, if you're just going to play casually, if you're just going to play your local, like the Forgeborns are pretty replaceable at that level.
Yeah.
Obviously, some are better than others, but it's not like a make or break thing
I certainly
unless there's
think
some reason you're specifically targeted on uh, one ability in one cycle.
right. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head at a local level where I mean some of our locals are pretty wild. Like I mean I've got some very strong local players here. If I go to play locally, I mean they can bring some real heat and be very competitive. I mean, two of my local players are top 8 SBI guys now, right? So I mean that's saying something too. And Joel has won an Shufflebus event. He's a local to me. So I think at the end of the day, like it's going to depend wholly on your local and the quality of the player in your local. Now, some of those players will choose to bring what they look at as like lower quality decks to the event just to sort of potentially even the playing field for new players and stuff like that, but they don't have to, right? And so you kind of have to be prepared for both or decide how you want to approach your local play. But um, basically, Neil hit the nail on the head when you say like, okay, you're really looking at how many cards out of your each half are just what I would call power cards on their own. It's a weird definition, I know, but that they're cards that are good without the help of anything else. And then there's some number of cards that are good with the help of something else, and then there are some number of cards that are just bad in every deck. I don't think any deck exists today, with maybe the exception of Nathas's World's Champions deck that is rolled perfect. I don't think any deck is rolled perfect up to this point.
It depends on what your like definition of that is. Like I don't think that there's a deck that exists in somebody's collection that they and I could be wrong. Like there are people like Nathas, like you mentioned, that have very, very large collections, a very high collection level.
Mm-hmm.
So but I haven't heard from anyone in the community that has said like this is the ideal 10 plus the perfect 3 Forgeborn abilities.
Right.
Like you're talking about Nathas's deck, right? Like Nathas's deck is very unique, the World's deck, because
Mm-hmm.
it has uh like an extremely awesome betrayer
Yeah, the crop
as
drum.
well
Right.
as like just insane other cards, but it's still like it's not perfect. Like we could ask him, I don't know if he's in chat, like if there's a card he would trade out for something else if he could literally pick anything. But like uh you know, I also don't think that like there's a deck that exists that's even close to what would be like the best deck given the card pool.
Right.
Um, because it would be some nonsense combination of like Stitcher combo stuff,
Right.
with also a bunch of good cards.
Right. So Solomir is
So
adding to the conversation here and says, so far I've just considered the Forge Bones as a bonus. I can see at the highest levels how they could be very impactful. And he goes, I'm not even the best player in my house. My son loves beating me. Well, the fact that you get to enjoy this game with your son, that's awesome, man. I can't wait until my son is old enough. He's 3 right now, so he's got a ways to go. But I can't wait until my son is old enough that we can enjoy games together. And I hope he likes them, because I have 2 older girls and they're not all that really into it in general. So I don't get a lot of family engagement out of stuff. But I look forward to that day that I get that.
yeah. As far as just like the talking about the Forgeborns, like they're in your collection. Once you have, I don't know, maybe 20 decks or so, there's going to be a deck that like has very good cards in it, and just a like a trashy Forgeborn, you're going to be real upset about it. The good thing about the game is that you can take that pile and just like pair it with a different half that has a Forgeborn that's playable.
Right.
Because most of the time what you're saying is correct at that level. Like the Forgeborns are just kind of a bonus, but you do want to have Forgeborn abilities that are impactful, because everybody does, and it's like a free action that's always in play. And so even if you're not looking for like the very best, there's gonna be like, you're gonna have this purple deck that has, five very good cards in it, and the rest are fillers, good to like reasonable filler cards. And you're gonna have like a Nyx with the bad Nyx abilities,
Right.
and you're gonna feel bad about it. But you're just gonna pair it with like an okay other half that has a good Forgeborn.
Right. Yeah, and that's really the key, right? So the key is that other half pairing can make or break. I mean, it really does make or break any deck, right? So that half pairing, because you just can't live with one half being good and the other half being average. Like, that's not going to make a good deck.
Like the what I consider the best deck in my whole collection is that Drix deck, and it has an Ironbeard that's not good. Like, I've played a bunch of iterations of it, and I've just never played the Ironbeard.
My Drix is very similar with the Steel Rosetta. My really good Drix deck is got a pretty bad Steel Rosetta. Like, she's not, but I have played her because I've never found a good pairing for that deck, at least in my mind, that had a good Forgeborn to go with it.
I think Rosetta is very good, just like in general, like
but my
all her
general
abilities
on her are kind of out of order. I have the repurpose or whatever it is, where you can use the Forgeborn ability at 2. So
right, that's the diciest one, because you're essentially like double rolling the RNG table,
right,
where you need to have a good Rosetta deck with that ability. You also need to have a good Forgeborn on your other half,
right,
in that cycle.
That's right. Well, let's get back to this news article, Neil, for this lore event here. We'll try to get through this. There's not much left on this. It says the next storyline event is called Undying Loyalty. In Necreum's bustling flesh forum, I'm not sure what that is, but I'm not sure I want to be part of that. A Stitcher-turned spy receives a cryptic message from a high-ranking traitor in the Queen's Guard. Choose to defend the Queen or help ignite the fire that ends her reign. So this is like a storyline event that's trying to... Yeah, Core's laughing over flesh form as well. I'm telling you, man, that was hard to come out of my mouth. I'm like,
Core, has the Forgeborn Finishing School done an episode on the flesh forum yet?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that one. Let me know when that one drops. I'll be the first one to watch it. Carl says Ironbeard is great for stealth and playing the long game. I mean, that may be true, Carl. I don't have a ton of Ironbeard experience. I'll be really honest about it. So
Ironbeard, like, he's like, I don't know. His abilities are good, but we know that blue is a little weaker than the other colors,
right,
for one. And the other 2 blue Forge, like Rosetta is just very good, I think.
Yeah.
Like,
her Forgeborn
almost all her abilities are very, very good. And then Crux is like flashier, like more fun.
Yeah.
Ironbeard is like I don't know, like the boomer Forgeborn, where his abilities are good, but he's just kind of boring. Like,
so this Necreum event clearly looks to be trying to like show the civil war sort of brewing inside of Necreum over Circe's claiming of the blighted forge, right? So that's what happened at Gen Con. I'm sure we'll see more of that evolve at PAX Unplugged this weekend. So be very curious, because that really leads into the last winner, and obviously she got corrupted in that process, and Oros got corrupted in that process. I think Sunder got corrupted too, right?
Sunder and Oros were the corrupted ones, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But didn't Circe get corrupted too?
I don't know if it's like she was just like evil to start
Anyways,
with,
yeah,
so
yeah.
I don't know if that's
So anyways, it's clear that they're writing a civil war storyline here inside of the Necreum faction for Nixon and Circe, and is it just the two of them, right? Just the two of them. We haven't gotten a third one in anything other than blue, right? Crux is the only new Forge one that's been added. Circe is blighted and Ironbeard in set 3. Okay, thanks, Core. I appreciate that. So then the next one up is called Glacial Predators. As the world thaws, an ancient species of Yetis emerges from the glacial north and threatens the Tempest clans. Faced with a dire choice, confront or retreat, the clan's decision will seal their fate. So Yetis are Soulforge Fusion's version of the White Walkers. Can we get that figured out? We've got
yeah.
that. We've got that handled now.
Yeah. Army of Undeadies.
Yeah, Undeadies. That's right. So, clearly, like this is, this makes sense. I mean, I don't know why the Tempests would be threatened by the melting though, because I mean they're literally wielding fire all the time. They
have a bunch of ice themed stuff too, though.
Primarily responsible for all global warming on Solus. Let's just be honest about it. So,
I mean, these are all just like color oriented storyline events, right?
That's what it is. It's and we don't know the rules around them yet, so we don't know, like, maybe you have to bring like a, like at the Tempest event, maybe you have to bring a half deck that's a Tempest deck. You can pair it with whatever you want, but you still have to bring a Tempest deck. We don't know any of the rules around the events yet. They've not revealed any of that stuff. So this is just the feeder for the spoiler for the story of these Forge Guardian lore events for 2024. And then
it's too bad that, like, I mean, I understand that in the spirit of the event, they don't want to talk about like the mechanics of the event before the tournament.
Right.
Like they want to like surprise you with the unique mechanics like at the time that you are there.
Right.
But like for instance at Worlds, right? They had the storyline event the second day.
Gen Con, yeah.
And this round 2 or round 3 like Necreum ability was absolutely busted, and just even crazier if you had a new Terra charger in your deck.
Right. Well, that's what I was saying though. One of the things I noticed from that event in my mind, and I noticed it also at Fuse Fest when I went to Fuse Fest in Tulsa, was that the storyline abilities in general were designed in such a way where they didn't necessarily benefit the strongest tier of decks out there. They would be, what I mean? And obviously that Necreum ability was right. No, and that's the whole point, I think. So obviously the Necreum ability was just busted in general. But
yeah, the only thing I was gonna say is like I kind of wish that we like had a tournament where you knew the mechanics ahead of time and built the decks to do crazy busted stuff.
That'd be kind of fun.
Because like, imagine if you knew ahead of time that your deck could have that Necreum ability.
Hey, Lucas or Fletch, if you hear that, we're willing to run an event next year for fun around that. If you can send us the storyline event stuff that's already been played out. Like we could do it as like a post storyline event thing. I have all the Gen Con story cards. I mean, we could recreate the Gen Con story event for that.
We're just like say we're gonna play an event that has those rules in place.
Yep. Yeah.
And see what people bring.
That'd be cool. I'd be a kind of a fun experiment to see what that does to the meta.
But obviously the idea of that format is just to like introduce new players to the game, give people a closer like doorway to the lore, and give people just a for fun event that they can play, like a reason to be there outside of just anything they could do at their normal local.
Absolutely. And so then the last event is called the Tuscari Divide, and it says, in the Frost Reach, Tuscari revere sacred glaciers. When one starts to melt, suspicion turns towards those in the Utera caverns. Tensions rise, forcing a choice between Loxar's traditions, and Tuscala's ways. Now, all right, I'm clearly going to get called out here because I don't. Who the hell is Loxar? Do you know who
I don't
Loxar is?
know.
Who's Tuscala? Do we know who any of these are? Is Tuscala the elephant dudes?
Somebody will.
Is
That
that the
sounds like an
Tuscari?
elephant name, but
Yeah,
I
I think
don't.
the Tuscari are the elephant dudes, but I don't know who the Loxars are.
That also sounds like an elephant name,
Right. So I don't know.
but I don't know.
Um, yeah.
Somebody can tell us in chat.
Somebody that's clearly more versed in the lore than we are. Which, like, do we at this point, Neil? Do we even play this game? Like, we clearly are not. We are
I
not
play the
qualified.
game.
I know. I'm joking, man. I'm joking.
I don't read the book.
Yeah. You should you read the book, man. Come on, read the manual. You got to be in. You got to be plugged in at all levels here to do this crap. But then it says they'll be announcing the first of these events in the near future and how you can get involved and shape the future of Solus. We cannot wait to see what unfolds and how the world of Solus will be impacted for it. So, obviously, this is interesting to me because this is the first really like announcement around organized play for 2024, and it's firmly aimed at the more casual tournament side of SoulForge, which totally fine. I kind of said that we thought that might happen based on some of the conversations we'd had with Alex at Gen Con, just based on how the turnouts for the events had shaped up over that weekend.
Core says the Tuscari are the elephants.
The Tuscari is the name of the elephant folk from the Utera faction. Okay, from the Kickstarter. Okay, but do we know who Loxar is? Like, did I miss that in the Kickstarter too? Anyways, I think it's a step in the right direction if you want to create new player engagement in these kinds of events. Of course, still looking for that.
Yeah. He's our man behind the scenes, just digging through the archive for us.
This is why we need a production assistant. So maybe we got to steal Greg away from Forgeborn Finishing School.
We can't do that now. I've watched a couple of their newer videos, and they have a brand new like intro graphic.
Oh no!
With their faces like photoshopped onto the characters.
We can just have like I don't know. We can get a different like.
I don't think Ryan would want to change that back.
You just change it into a question mark, like what happened to Greg? Nobody knows. He's working behind the scenes at the Shufflebus.
Yeah, came to work for the Shufflebus.
That's right.
But
those are the actual card faces. That's funny. So did you guys make cards of yourselves?
I gotta bring it up now. I'll find one. Maybe I'll be able to send it to you. We'll see if the internet.
From the Ultimate Championships. Ah. Let me pull up Forgeborn Finishing School here. We'll see. They just released the video today, so it's got to be on there, right?
So I think this.
It was. I saw him first on the Blight Skull Bomb video they did.
That's what I got on right now
today.
I muted it so that I don't spoil the content here.
It was a nice little video.
Okay, so those. Got it. So these are your UC rewards with your guys' your portraits. I understand it now. We are seeing it live and in person here. That's sweet. That's sweet.
Yeah, that's cooler than when I just thought it was Ryan doing some photoshopping.
Don't give away all of our secrets, Neil. This is how we have to live over on the Shufflebus. So, yeah, no, that's cool. Good for you guys. That's awesome. Very well deserved. I don't know. Greg, you look infinitely more strong than Ryan. Is that by design since you won both of them? Ryan is reaching for some sort of hidden power that doesn't exist, and Greg's just like, I'll just run over you with my Dark Forge Drain and my Kindred War Tusk. Enjoy the day.
No, Ryan has the Kindred War Tusk.
Oh, that's true. That's true.
Yeah, those are sweet. I didn't realize those were your images from UC, so that is cool.
Yeah. All right. Okay. So I mean that covers all the news. That's the only news we got. Again, we got PAX Unplugged.
I'll make one comment reaching back to your thing about the this being promotional material for a casual level event, I agree with you that it's like essentially a casual format because it has the wacky rules,
Right.
and that's, it's also going to draw to the competitive players as well, because as we've seen from the community, they care about the storyline events, and they want to be part of them because it does like write the history of the game and everything.
And I think they just want to
Uh,
show support
um,
too, right? Like even if you're a
but
competitive player, you just want to be supportive of how things are
right,
evolving,
and
right?
it's a big-ish level event that is like Stoneblade sponsored.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but this doesn't mean that there's not going to be competitive stuff alongside this as well, right? Like
Right.
this is just like announcing this section of their plans going forward. I'm sure there will still be just
Yeah.
normal constructed, normal sealed tournaments that
Well,
will
and
go
I
on in
gave
the
I
season.
gave Chad a little early sneak preview that we're going to be laying out a calendar for 2024 that has a number of sealed events uh,
Right.
being played out. So obviously the front half of that, like January, February, is still going to be White Fang Pass, right? There's just no two ways around that. But once we get to last winter, it's going to be a lot of last winter sealed, and maybe we'll do some sort of wacky mix sealed as well. I don't know yet. I've been kind of toying around with that idea of like you open like from 3 booster kits, you make 3 player kits, but they have randomized sets to seal with. So I don't know. I've been playing around with that idea just to kind of create some uniqueness in that's not just all set contained. But that could be wildly broken too. It's hard to know for sure. So anyways, long story short, we'll be talking more about sealed and what those formats look like and when those events are coming so that you all can mark them off, because I don't know. Some of them may be leagues, but I think most of them will probably be single day events as we go out into the world, just because we can do so many more single day events and we can't do as many league, right? Like leagues just take months to complete. So I know people like leagues. I get that. And I think even Core and Casey Kidd mentioned that SBI should have been a league so they could have participated in it. But then we'd be playing into January of next year to do that. So, I mean, it's just very difficult to do that. So I mean, that pretty much covers all that. Neil, is there anything you want to talk about specifically with SoulForge before we bring Casey Kidd on? He's going to be on in about 18 minutes. We're going to talk about competitive SoulForge. This they proposed on their channel a couple of weeks back, a best of 3 format. I have some reservations about it that aren't
That was
anything to
an
do with it.
interesting conversation.
Yeah,
Uh,
and so
but
I do. We're gonna bring Casey Kidd on the channel tonight, and we're gonna talk about that because I think one of the things that we talked about, you and I talked about a lot when we were at Gen Con, is just the conversations that we had with Greg and Ryan. That I said they almost needed to be recorded, right, just so that the community could hear how deep and passionate Greg and Ryan are, and you and I are about this game in such a way where we're thinking really critically about it, right? We're really thinking about it from a critical perspective. Not that we have any sway, right? Not that we have any way of changing the trajectory that Stoneblade is going with it. Just that we care enough about it that we want to talk about the ways we think it could be better, right? And we talked about that when we came out of Gen Con. Like Greg and Ryan convinced us that things like Krogius and Rumbleheart weren't necessarily good for the game, and we actually saw Stoneblade make a change to Rumbleheart, not necessarily because of our feedback or impact. They may have been thinking about it well before that. I'm sure they were. Just that, their spirit, the spirit conversation was very, very good. And we have an episode that goes back. It's right after Gen Con somewhere. It's on our YouTube channel. I'm sure if you go back and you can find it and pull it up. But it just talks about how we think the game should be experienced at a competitive level and what makes it more interesting competitively. And things like Krogius and Rumbleheart kind of go against that spirit in general. But we're going to have that kind of similar discussion, but we're going to do it live. So we have no idea what's going to happen here. Like it could be a complete and utter, disaster, or it could be, pure content gold. We'll find out in about 20 minutes. So, but is there anything you want to add to this conversation right now. SoulForge in general, competitive SoulForge, storyline SoulForge. Um, what are you going to do with your month off? That sort of thing.
Well, I the only SoulForge that I've been playing lately is like uh app stuff, um app testing stuff. And honestly, like playing like the campaign mode of that mode makes those storyline events feel a lot more like normal than uh strange, I guess. I don't know if that makes a lot of sense,
Mhm.
but like having played the app, um and they have the campaign mode where you level up your deck and you add new effects to your deck and you do weird stuff. Like if that's the kind of game they're shooting for, maybe that is going to be like a big part of the game going forward, are these like Forge Guardian type events. Because it's really easy to implement that stuff on the app, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if they're going to have digital events, uh, obviously this will be sometime in the future when the app is actually released, but uh, it would be very easy to set up an event like that and just, instead of having Fletch walk around with, well, we all have like a little card with the rules written on it, it's just the app can just do it for you.
Right.
And that really takes advantage of like the digital nature of the game then. Um,
Do you have any
to
concerns that the
just
app
kind
will
of do
kill
whatever
the
they want
physical
with them.
game?
I think it definitely will.
Oh, okay. I mean, yeah, then
Like
there's definitely a
I think
concern
there's no chance.
there.
Like I wouldn't call it a concern. I think it's just like fact.
So you don't
Right.
you think by sometime down the road when the app is more robust and fully
There,
fleshed out, then we just won't have a Gen Con tournament, paper tournament anymore.
no, they'll still hold a tournament at like Gen Con or whatever. They're just th- there has never been in my experience a game that has gone hybrid digital physical uh that has retained the physical aspect.
Do you think
Like,
Magic has with Arena?
yes, but it didn't go it's not hybrid.
Sure.
There's no collection sharing. Like
Sure.
your
I see
physical
what you mean by
collection is
hybrid.
separate
Okay.
from
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
your physical collection is separate from your digital collection. And also Magic had 15 years of very profitable, like very popular paper history
Right.
before Moto came online.
Right.
So I'm talking about games like Age of Sigmar,
Yeah. Yeah.
like ones where the digital part came within a short time period of the physical part.
Right.
And honestly, like if Magic was any other game, they would have cut the physical part like a year after Arena came out.
Sure.
Because Magic is Magic, and you can just like print the word Magic the Gathering on a box and people will buy it
Yeah.
for collector value, like that won't ever go away.
Right.
But you just have to think about it from a business standpoint and also from your average player standpoint. So, from a business standpoint, yes, there's some cost to upkeep the digital version of the
Mm-hmm.
game.
Mm-hmm.
It's much lower than printing physical product.
Yeah.
Like there's upfront costs that we're dealing with right now. That's why they had the Kickstarter to like actually make the app. But once it's going, like printing cards is much more expensive than
Oh yeah.
like
I mean,
adding cards to the
10
database.
times the cost, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah.
So that's simple math. Now, from a player perspective, because we live in 2023 and this is a culture of like TikTok children where you have attention span of like 35 seconds or whatever.
Right. 8 seconds now.
Okay. Like a goldfish.
It is.
Uh, what when the average person that interacts with a digital product has an attention span like that, the uh like Marvel Snap is like the perfect example.
Right.
People don't want to, I mean, again, I'm making generalizations. The people that are watching this, I assume are the minority and don't agree with what I'm going to say. because I also like
Don't agree with what
don't
you're gonna
want this
say.
very often.
Yeah, yeah.
Well, so there are times in my life where I want the Marvel Snap experience
Right.
where I don't want to have to like call up my buddy and say, "Hey, like let's sit down for a couple hours and play a board game." I just want to like play the fastest game of Magic you've ever seen.
Right.
So I just like hit the big green button on the Marvel Snap app and it pairs me. I don't have to do anything. I never have to interact with my opponent. There's no chat. Like, and I just play the game. Like, there are times when I want that experience, right?
Sure.
It's not all the time, and it's not the majority of the time, but for a lot of people, and for a lot of people with disposable income, it is the majority of the time that they want that experience.
Agree.
And that's what the app provides, right? And
Yep.
it provides it in this game specifically provides it in two ways. It provides it where it will have just like a pair me to play the game button,
Hmm.
pair you with another person and you'll play. And it also has the campaign mode where you can play solo in, you know, a roguelike Slay the Spire type experience. And it's again just on demand.
So what'd be kind
And
of interesting is to see if they would incorporate. Solimir added in chat. I hope they don't go away from the physical game. It's one of the aspects I will enjoy. It's one of the
right.
aspects I will enjoy. Yeah.
And
The
obviously there are people out there that are going to buy the product, like,
right.
or the Kickstarter would not have succeeded.
Right.
But I just I believe that it is inevitable that two things. The game can't be successful without the app.
Hmm.
And if the app is successful, the app will be the focus of the game.
Yeah.
Like right now we're talking about the game in a way that it's a focus on physical stuff that you can move to the app. I think it's inevitable that going forward it will reverse itself if it's successful, where
Yeah.
people are not going to want to like go order something on Stoneblade website, get it to their house and scan it in their collection so they can put it in their app. They're going to want to just buy a digital product on the app directly.
And I mean, yeah, I agree. I agree with you. At some point, it probably is inevitable. And how Stoneblade chooses to handle that if it comes, if they want to support physical, because one of the things that would be somewhat tricky is this environment of like we said, the big Gen Con tournament. Well, if that big Gen Con tournament is held, with a physical product, but your digital collection doesn't match up with your physical collection, then it's tough. That's going to be a tough spot.
Right. So it's as long as they're printing physical cards, which they may continue to do for a long time.
Right.
Like I'm not saying this is like
Next set
sometime
or
next
something.
year
Right.
the
Yeah.
app's gonna like show up and they're gonna say set 4 is no physical cards. I don't think that's gonna happen.
Right.
I'm just saying like if the game has a future, I think it's in digital because digital is so much easier on a small development team like that.
Yeah.
With lower
Once you have the
amount of
infrastructure in place, like
resources.
you mentioned, yes.
Yeah. And so as long as they continue to print cards, even if they're like, you know, just small number of physical products and large number of digital products, they'll still show up at the big cons and they'll still have a tournament. Like
Sure.
people are still going to care about that. But uh
Solomir
the
adding he doesn't want it to become another Hearthstone. No interaction, just play. Part of the fun is the interaction with the other players. Yeah,
well,
I understand that sentiment for sure, Solomir. I get it.
so I mean that's kind of
In Corsa, they had a similar on their at the end of their next episode coming out. They had a similar discussion about this. It'll be interesting how they
I
navigate the
mean
future of this product.
what Solimir is saying there is essentially what I've been trying to say is like he may he may not want that experience, but there may be a lot of people that do.
Right.
And again, I'm not saying that it like can't coexist. Like the the physical product and the digital product.
Mm-hmm.
And in the modern day, the digital product is going to be like that, right? Like even if it has like a chat system where you can interact with your opponent, like Motor or some of the older ones, like obviously Hearthstone doesn't, and Magic Arena doesn't.
Right.
Uh, they have like emotes that you can kind of like. It's honestly worse than having a chat box because it's just like BM emotes all the time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and for the most part, card games don't have the like really terrible, vulgar, uh, like Call of Duty internet kid speech
Right.
on them. But even if it has that, it's still gonna feel separate, um, because that's just how digital card games work.
Yeah, I mean, I'll say this, Solimir, in defense of whether it goes all digital or not. The This game is going to be uniquely different, even to a Hearthstone or any sort of digital trading card game, because of the deck distribution model, right? Like it makes it much more interesting in comparison to a Hearthstone where a meta gets defined and that very definition is something that everybody's striving to sort of build the same three decks to compete at the highest levels. But I mean, I think that still happens in any card game. SoulForge is not immune to that. But I think that it's much more difficult to have multiple players recreate that. So there's a downside and a plus side to that. The downside is that you know, if you're not the lucky end of that, meaning you don't have a deck that can compete at that level, it can be frustrating when you run into one of those things. But the plus side of that is that you're going to have much more of a
But
positive experience in
assuming that
general.
assuming that there is a like reasonable number of casual players out there that will get the app,
Right.
which I assume that if you've spent some money on the game and you have a collection of even a small size, like you're gonna want to get the app because it's free and like
Right.
scan your stuff in because you get to play it that way and like you can challenge your friends, so like you can get on Discord call or whatever and play against your buddy.
Yep.
But like you're saying, because of the nature of this game, one thing that we don't see in our community is the average player.
Right.
Our community is all like extreme, the like extreme minority of high collection level players,
Right.
which the app will, I think, expose that a little bit more. And most of the games you play are going to be against, people with 20 decks, with 10 decks,
Right.
uh, that are playing the game.
Which will be a super casual experience.
Right.
But to Solomir's point, you still wouldn't get that sort of interactive face to face, i.e., even a
Right.
Discord call, conversation that happens during
And
the game.
for the foreseeable future, you can still get that playing in paper because it isn't going to go away
Right.
immediately.
Right.
And it honestly, like, it may never go away. Maybe the app is not a success. I think if that happens, uh, likely the game will not live long after that. But uh,
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if Stoneblade navigates it by the only way you can add decks in the app is through purchasing paper product. That would be an interesting way to sort of keep both alive. It just would be a question
yeah,
of
I mean, it's my understanding, and maybe it's changed since the last time I asked about this because I haven't discussed the future of
sure.
SoulForge with Shadow or anybody in a long time.
Yeah.
But the idea was, at least at the beginning, that you get the app, and in the app, if you want to purchase product, what happens is you click on a link that takes you to their like SBE store, like
Right.
on their website,
Right.
and then you order the product. So you don't actually get the product on the app until
It
it is
shows up at your
delivered to
door.
you and
Right.
you can scan it in.
Yep.
And for as long as that's happening, then obviously it's kind of what you guys are talking about, where he says it should supplement the physical game.
Yeah.
Well, I mean that is what it's going to do for as long as you can't buy product direct digital
Correct.
through the app.
Yeah. I mean, and I agree. I don't know what the future holds. But I do think that, there's a lot of opportunity in the app-based game to make some really cool modifications just in general to the way SoulForge plays at both a casual level and a competitive level. So it'd be interesting to see how that sorts itself out. Because it'd be very difficult to do some of that in person, right? But there's opportunity for it. Like Imagine a world where like you get this deck that's like 6 out of 10 great cards, and you could upgrade one card out of those, right? You can't do that in the paper form, but you could do that in the digital form, right? Like you could essentially be given the ability to improve deck quality without impacting any function of that deck or any part of the printing process of that deck, because there would be no printing process. So it give a little bit more choice, right? And the idea that, you know, maybe you make one upgrade and it's like a churn and burn. You only get one. If you do it wrong, you're screwed. You know, I mean, there could be some punishment for that, so it's not just like players just getting to try various things. But at the end of the day, like there's just some potential opportunity there digitally that doesn't exist physically. Never mind the fact that the game just plays infinitely faster on the app. I mean,
Right. I mean that is a big benefit.
yeah,
Is this game is really fiddly because of all the persistent damage,
right,
and the numbers of damage are not small. It's not like everything's a 3/3.
right.
Um, so it's really fiddly and it's hard to keep track of. But the app does it so good for you. It really cuts the game time down a lot. And that, I mean, that's a big benefit. You know, the Forge One boys were talking about best of 3 matches. That
Right.
is like tough on paper, but potentially very viable on the app.
Well, that is a great segue because we are ready to bring Casey Kidd on, Neil.
I'd better call it a night then.
um, wait, I am ready to bring him in. So I'm going to start a call. The call's going to be in Discord. So if you want to mute your Zoom, you have a group chat with us. It's you and Casey Kidd and myself. So I'm going to start a group video call there, start a call there, and we'll pick up this conversation with the best of 3. Ryan, how's it going, buddy? Hey there. Hello.
Nope, he's dead.
He's dead. We killed him already. We broke his settings. Well, I'm glad you can hear me, Neil. At least I know it's not on my end.
Hey, I can hear you.
Hey, there he is. Everybody, welcome Casey Kidd to the show, member of the Forgeborn Finishing School. You know, we gave Greg a little bit of love earlier, Ryan. So, you know, now it's time for us to love up on you a little bit. So, you are Casey Kidd on the Discord, but you compete and have basically been nearly as successful as Greg at every competitive event you've been involved in, and certainly I know you've dominated some of your local metas. But we're excited to talk to you because a couple of weeks ago on your show, you started a topic of conversation with Greg about best of 3 format in SoulForge Fusion, and I really let that percolate for a while before I said anything, because I think I have some different opinions on it, but maybe if you can give our TLDR for our audience on just sort of what you and Greg talked about and why you think it's important from your perspective that competitive SoulForge goes to best of 3, and then we can kind of riff off of that from there.
Yeah, absolutely. One thing I'll say too, you mentioned how you percolated a little bit. And, that's one thing I feel like I really do appreciate about your opinions as well, Jesse, is that, like when I think back to that, the delicatessen we were at and having that conversation, and for long bits of time, it was, Neil, Greg, and I just kind of riffing off each other and razzing each other. And I could tell you're deep in thought. And then once every 7 to 15 minutes, you would come out with something that just kind of shuts the whole table down. And we're like, oh, okay, well, let's think about that. And so, yeah, when you mentioned come on here, it's like, yeah, I can't turn down the opportunity to talk to you guys about this. And really, the whole conversation wasn't really just best of 3. I think that was one of the biggest recommendations that kind of came out of it.
Right.
But one of it it really was just is the competitive structure that Stoneblade built originally functional today? And because I think they built an amazingly robust structure, framework, if you will, that was made for a large player base. So you could tell it was created by someone with loving hands that has attempted a lot of things elsewhere, learned a lot of lessons along the way, and said, I'm going to lay the groundwork correct from the beginning, and this is how it's going to work. And I've always been really impressed with that framework. But again, I think it was built for a larger player base, and over a year into this experiment, we're not there.
Right.
And one of those big pieces is the buys as well, the buy incentivization for your decks. And then the other piece was the best of three format, which in a lot of their verbiage and wording, best of three was kind of always the de facto consideration for competitive events. But then I think once we put the game on the table with a certain amount of people, and our competitive tournaments to this date have been, I think, no more than 26.
Yeah, I think that's about right.
In person, and that the time constraints really just enforce that the best of three isn't a viable format. And so we ended up kind of going down the road of best of one has just been the answer that we've all kind of went to. And now, as we are moving into the application, and I would say even as we're doing more and more competitive tournaments online, such as the Shufflebus tournaments, I think we have the ability to be flexible and maybe kind of decide if that's the way we want to go. Do we want to do best of one?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question, right? And I'll be the first one to tell you that I prefer my card games to be best of three. I think the best card game experiences I've had competitively have always been in best of three formats. That's Magic, that's Transformers trading card game, that's Versus trading card game going back to the mid 2000s. Those were all best of three games, right? And the skill. I talked a little bit about this in a separate post if anybody was following along on the Fifth Cycle Discord, where this kind of exploded out into a larger topic where I decided we should bring you on. But the skill to me in a best of three format is less about playing the deck, because at that point in time, the play of a deck in a best of three, you better know how to play your deck, right? So like the skill factor of the player is reduced. And in a traditional trading card game like Magic or Versus or any of these games that I've mentioned that I've had experience with, the meta is pretty clearly defined. And so the variation in deck quality is 0 or near 0, right? Like it's some people call that a stagnant meta. They don't find it interesting because it's a net deck, or you call it whatever you want. But that's a point in time where the decks are pretty equal. And I don't think, and that's where then the player skill comes in, because sideboard decisions and knowing matchups and knowing your percentages for, okay, if I swap these cards out of my deck for this matchup, I improve my percentage chance of victory by 2, 3, 4, 5%. Those kinds of things become really super skillful. And that's where the skill at competitive events like a Magic tournament or a Flesh and Blood tournament or whatever, to insert your favorite best of three game here, really come into play. And obviously that doesn't necessarily hold up in SoulForge. So I'd like to get your thoughts on, like, obviously I gave you a little bit of precursor when I talked about some of this stuff in the Fifth Cycle. Like, so you've had some time to think about it too. Has that been a consideration since the conversation started? Like, how do you think we solve that deck quality variation? I mean, obviously we can't solve it because we're not designing the game, but how does the game have to move forward in its design if that was going to be a consideration for competitive play moving forward?
Well, I think SoulForge Fusion has all of the tools built in to address your concerns, kind of as is. So first and foremost, we'll go with the one where I would recommend changing something. And before you talked about a stale meta, i.e. net decking, to some extent. And, this goes back to the spirit of SoulForge. I think if you tone down some of the base rare cards, and this is changing something we probably don't have the power to change, but if you tone down some of the base rare cards, which in effect are more common than the Forge Word creatures, just tone down their power a little bit, you end up with a more diverse meta because players are building less and less around specific Catalyst-esque or Catalyst type cards, i.e. Krogius. But I still think we're in a very, very good spot when you talk about a meta of this game because even though I think Rumble Spark is problematic, I think upgrade cheat mechanics and Krogius decks are problematic. They are not infallible, right? They are definitely beatable. The variance in this game is pretty drastic, I think, compared to a lot of competitive games. So I really think we're in an okay spot, especially the meta-wise. But then to go on to kind of the second part you brought up is the player skill between games and how that's addressed in other games is sideboard. I really think that the sideboard for this game is already built into the deck and into the structure of the way we play the game. So the way we play Soulforge is that you get to see 75% of your cards at any given time. And I would say in a really competitive game, if your deck doesn't have upgrade mechanics, sometimes 25% of your deck is no longer or is likely no longer usable. And so you're really forced down different play lines. And so not only can your skill dictate that you change your play line that you would like to emphasize, but also your draw pattern changes the play line that you take the deck down. So for example, I just played a November League match earlier today, and I ended up going down a hibernating Spell Knight route with my deck, which I rarely go down, but because it was put in my hand with a Flame Jet and then 3 other bad cards. So it's like, okay, well, I'm going to play the Spell Knight, play the free spell, and make it a little bit bigger. But now that I've already leveled up a level 1 Spell Knight, it's not that hard to level up to level 2, and then I have a really big Spell Knight. And that's not something I would do if the draw didn't force me into that. So if I go into a 2 of 3, there's no way the draw forces me into that play line. Again, because I have different cards I generally like to play, but if you hand that on a platter, I'm going to take that play line. Sure. And I think player skill can help really massage the play lines you go down as well. In our local scene, I think we've done a bit more best of 3, and I would say they're like unofficial. But generally, when I'm playtesting decks, if it's with the Charge Plated Crew or Greg Core, generally we kind of hash out 2 or 3 and see how it goes. And you could see the games do change pretty drastically.
So when you guys have done that, so you're further along in quote unquote testing this theory than I certainly am. I have not tried a best of 3 in actual practice. It's just all theory in my brain. Do you guys then adhere to the rule that whoever got Forge in the first match, then the other player gets choice of Forge in the second match? Do you do it that way, or do you just randomize each game?
Yeah, so we're playing in TTS, and it was never done with the intent to test the best of 3 format, right? So it was always just random, of course.
Yeah.
And I think that's a huge swaying factor. So if I were to lose the first game and then I get to choose the Forge in the second, I do think that for certain decks, the Forge has an outsized effect on the game.
Yeah. Neil, do you have any thoughts on this conversation so far?
Well, I definitely don't think that you can change how the Forge works at all.
You think every game?
I think every game it has to be random.
Yeah.
It's like Ryan just said.
You're talking about just in TTS as a TTS limitation, though. I'm
talking about the game in general would be out of whack if any player got to choose the Forge at any time.
I see. Okay.
Like that would drastically change the way the game plays, I think.
Well, I think you play the first match random.
Right. Obviously, but I think like the game is designed with random Forge in mind. So as soon as you add Forge choice, even if it's part of a pseudo like comeback mechanic in a best of 3, I think that's bad, and I think the game will not operate as intended. Like obviously most games you're going to play will not be affected, but if we're talking about like trying to make it as competitive as possible and trying to make the most fair experience as possible, like the game is designed with randomized forge in mind, and I think taking that away will grant advantages where there should not be.
I do think that when you said to make it as competitive as it can be or fair, those aren't synonymous in my mind. And I would say in almost every card game, being on the play or off the play is a pretty drastic advantage. And so, with the intent of the loser of the first match gets to choose the forge of the second match, the intent is to give them a slight advantage. And so, if they can be beat again with a slight advantage, you've obviously found the more superior deck and or player or combination.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a comeback mechanic, right? Like it's an attempt,
Yeah.
it's a balancing attempt. And that, I mean, that's what it is in Magic. That's what it is in Pokemon or all the other games that have best of three, like that the loser gets to choose. But I just think the way that SoulForge is designed, that's like, you know, the conversation you were talking about us having at Gen Con is a conversation about like the spirit of SoulForge and what makes SoulForge like what it is. And I think that I don't know that adding the aspect of the game that like you're now going to give Forge choice like thought process during deck building really stays with that spirit. But I mean, I could be convinced otherwise, I suppose. Like obviously it just take data.
There's some chat.
I would say that
there's some chat coming in. I just want to read it off so that you guys it can be added in here. Madungu talks about, he mentioned on Discord, but he doesn't think there's a big gap in deck quality at a competitive level right now. I want to come back to that in a minute, Madungu. He does add that there certainly could be if they print more mistakes, and I think we've been pretty lucky so far. Nova Elementalist is borderline, but carried by Red's average card quality. I guess he's saying that Red has a lower average card quality. Core Greg adds in the other half of the Forge board finishing school here. I don't think picking the Forge or off Forge is not as I don't think picking Forge or off Forge is not as impactful. So I guess I'm in a different camp. I can be slight to change the outcome, but I feel it's much less impactful than in Pokemon or Magic. I don't know the answer to that, right? Obviously, I have no game data to like go, oh yeah, like.
Well, I mean, there's definitely decks that very much want to have double Forge in cycle 2.
Oh, for sure.
Like, that's a big thing. I think that if we're gonna make the argument that like that there should be initiative choice, like Forge choice, in game 2 and 3, there should be in game 1 as well.
Mhm.
So you should randomize the player that gets to choose in game 1,
Mhm.
and then they choose, and then you go choice for loser
So
in games 2 and 3. Like
I'm gonna
that
ask,
makes more sense to me than
I
random than choice.
Right, I get it, and obviously all of this would have to be thoroughly vetted and tested before it's ever implemented into a tournament structure, especially with something that has real meaning or impact. And Ryan, I want to let you know that I agree with you 100% that I think the initial OP plan was what excited me the most for SoulForge because of the what if, right? What if it could be that and be big and do this great thing? And obviously you're right, we're not there today. And now the question that I think I lead into from that is, as a community, since we're sort of the primary drivers of competitive SoulForge, right? Like when you look at how you're going to play organized play SoulForge in this community now, it's not really SBE led, right? Like we had how many Ultimate Championships last year? 3? 2 or 3?
There was a Europe one, 2 in America and 1 in.
There's 5 or 6.
Was there 5 or 6 Ultimate Championships, really?
Yeah, so it's Indy, Denver, Origins, Liverpool,
I forgot
the other
Origins,
UK
yeah.
one, Gamehole Con.
So there were 3 North America ones?
4.
Or 4?
4 North America
Four.
Ultimate Champions. That
What was the
probably is
turnout at the
the Gamehole Con? The Madison
yeah.
one?
I think it was eight people maybe.
I don't even remember hearing about that.
I don't either. I don't even know the results of that tournament. I'd have to go back and find it.
Yeah, Mundungu took that down, so
Okay.
he's going to end up with a card. I'm very excited to see what he comes out of there with.
So Madungu's adding here that to clarify his comment that he thinks that the red cards in general have a pretty high value. They're really good, and so Nova's just adding to that value essentially. And Core's adding, and the Origins UC tournament was sealed. I did forget that was an Ultimate Championship. It was a sealed Ultimate Championship at Origins. And I apologize for that. The Madungu says there were 4 people at GameholeCon, 4 at an Ultimate Championship. That's a concern, right? You got to be concerned about that.
Yeah.
You know, because that tells me that and to be fair, we ran a bunch of competitive events with Shufflebus and saw this too. It essentially turned into the same 19 or 20 people every event, right? Like that's what it turned into. And
that's what digital should be, though.
I agree. Yeah, I'm not disagreeing with that at all. But it is, those same people are the same people that were participating at Gen Con Worlds, right? That are participating
right, and they should be. Like, right. I agree that, like, going from indie that we had like 20-ish, I don't even remember. It seems like a lifetime ago.
Math is adding, there's only 6 currently registered for the Ultimate Championship at PAX as of yesterday, which is this weekend. So, I mean,
I really wish that I could go to PAX, but
I do too.
Going down this topic, kind of, and that's really what spurred the conversation between Core and I, was kind of the Gamehole Con, and it also spawned into another conversation we had about marketing. But it was Gamehole Con's low attendance and the buy process of that, which essentially was the winning player had a buy straight into the finals, which is just the way it's built because of the framework we talked about. And then your guys' invitational, essentially the way that some of the oddities turned out there, I would say, is really what spurred this conversation. And it's just because when you get these smaller amounts, the framework breaks, in my opinion.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I agree. I do think that there's an overly judicious amount of buys delivered, especially
your assessment in your YouTube video was spot on, I think. Like, this was built on essentially just like they took the Magic the Gathering OP and made it as close to that as they possibly could while using like the rules of SoulForge.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the Magic, obviously, like that, I think that's a great place to start with your OP because it's been successful for a very long time. But
the Magic
to your
framework's
point,
not very scalable, though.
It doesn't work at low body count,
right? Which
is where we're at.
Yeah, it's like reverse scale, right? Magic is built for big scale numbers, and at reverse scale, you're just, it doesn't work. And I agree that the first silver event we ran was SBI, and just the administration of that alone shows you how much it's problematic and should just not exist. But
yeah, I mean, obviously, like, it's complicated for the TO, which is awkward. But even more so, it just like it just doesn't make sense at that. It's and honestly, like, Magic doesn't work at small numbers. Like, I ran many Magic tournaments in my life. When I worked for Hobbytown, I was TOing like multiple events a week, and like we just kind of winged it because when running a Swiss tournament, when you have like 9 or 13 players or something like that, it's just like awkward. Doesn't make sense.
Mm-hmm.
And you just end up with like weird pairings because people have played each other, and like and that's just like the micro of it, including like the tournament incentive, like the buys and stuff, and even something as core to the game as like the deck level up system of silver, gold, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's not currently functioning, I think, even as they want it to. But it's hard to backtrack that stuff, especially in their current position, where the whole identity of the game may change when the app comes out.
Right.
Ooh.
So I guess I want to step back into the best of three conversation. Obviously,
Mhm.
the the current tournament infrastructure has to change. I don't think there's any doubt about that. The renown system, the deck leveling system, all of it, I think, is really great if the game grows larger. But in the
Right. I mean,
interim,
it's definitely good to like have that in the pocket for if we get to, 10,000 registered players
right,
that are, that we get 50 player UCs throughout the year, that we get, you know, 200 player world championships at Gen Con. Like, all of a sudden, all that stuff makes a lot more sense.
yep. Nath is adding that even though there's a big OP update coming soon, trademark. I don't know what that means. They could still make minor updates, such as making more robust tiebreakers. Yeah, I don't even want to go down into the level of tiebreakers because arbitrarily it's very difficult to understand what's actually meaningful in tiebreakers. In a best of one, especially, is a problem for that. But the conversation, what comes to my mind first and foremost is the already high barrier of entry to be competitive in SoulForge Fusion. I'm not going to out you, Ryan, but I'll be the first one to say, like, my SoulForge collection is 250-ish decks. Neil, what's your SoulForge collection? 150, 160 decks at this point?
Probably like 240, 250.
Okay, so you and I have very similar collection levels.
Yeah.
Ryan, are you willing to share your collection level?
Yeah, I currently have just slightly over 100 decks in my collection.
But you just pared a bunch down, right?
I did. I
Right.
sold about 600.
600, right? Yeah. Okay. So
Yeah.
so your real collection level is like 700. You just got rid of the 500 junk decks and kept 100, or not junk. I don't want to call them junk. That's not fair. You got rid of 500 decks that you didn't feel made the cut as potential viable competitive decks.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. So 700 decks to get you 100, right? Like that seems like a large number still. I'd be really surprised if all 100 of those decks are still competitively viable, but I could get why you would want to maybe explore some of those, right? Or find pairings for some of those. So, cool. I think that when you go to best of 3, that the level of deck quality, the bar for deck quality goes up even higher. Like, I think, like we talk about, like, part of what's trying to be solved is the individual game draw dependencies, allowing players that have maybe quote unquote decks that drew really well and other players' decks that drew really poorly can cost game wins or losses. But in the best of one, that certainly exists. There's no doubt about that. But when you go to the best of 3, it also raises the bar for how good a deck has to be consistently competitively viable at the highest levels of the game. And that further accelerates the depth of collection need in order to be truly competitive at the highest levels. I'm talking about, you want to go out and compete at Worlds and try to win Worlds, you're probably well above even 700 decks to do that in a best of 3 format. Because I think at that point, your deck quality isn't okay at 5 or 6 cards acceptable. It's now got to be 8 or 9, potentially.
Well, you bring up a great point, and that's why I love SoulForge Fusion, and I love limited play, right? That's my preferred. I'm going to play sealed if I can,
Right.
or I'm going to play storyline if I can.
Right.
And I love that Stoneblade is really leaning into those formats because that is, in my opinion, the potential lifeblood for this game. But to bring that back to your other conversation is, what do you want the competitive SoulForge Fusion to look like? And if you want to find the best player, which I think you should, or the best deck, because in this game, there's a lot there. You need to cater to that audience as well. And so if this is a game that incentivizes purchasing large amounts of decks, and I know Mandungu has said that deck collections don't levels matter that much in competitive because you can buy off the secondary market. Well, I would push back and say, well, every deck you bought off the secondary market counts as 30 in your collection. There's
for sure.
equivalation there,
if not more, yeah.
if not more. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. I try to use the term collection level not to have much to do with like the literal number, but just like how much time and money you've spent into getting there. And
Right.
like I 100% agree with Mendungu. Like you can I think currently the secondary market for this game is very lacking for one, but that's kind of a different conversation. And that's just because right now the community is small. That's another thing that will scale with larger numbers of players.
So I want to point out something really quick on this because we're talking about secondary markets. The only secondary market I'm aware of right now that's active every single day is Trey's over at what is it? Cardboard Kingdom? What's his name? What's the name of his site? My brain's stopped working. What's Trey's site?
Kingswood
Hobbies.
Thank you. Brain had stopped there. If you go out on eBay, there was a period in time on this game about 5 or 6 months ago where there were a lot of active decks on eBay for sale. If you go on eBay today to do that, which is a great secondary market for card acquisition, especially when you don't have a TCG player or some sort of like actual e-com site dedicated to it, there are no decks for sale right now. It's all sealed product. None. You can't buy a single deck on eBay right now. So I don't think the secondary market is accessible. I think we would like it to be, but I don't think it's accessible.
Right. I mean, the secondary market is exactly what it is, right? Like what you just said, right? Like it exists. It is small and like not very efficient because I mean, not to say that Trey doesn't do a good job with his website, but like there aren't a lot of people interested in the game, so there aren't a lot of people out there interested in the secondary market. Like that's again just a thing that scales with players. And so, you end up with like more often something like what Ryan just did where somebody is, purging 400 decks from their collection. I know that Cody and Jurch have done that a couple times. And Tess has, I don't know if they're still doing like weekly or monthly, whatever they did, sales of decks via the Excel sheet in the Discord. Like, but like you said, there's not like a TCG player for this game, right?
Right.
Like, and there never will be. Like,
I know that Grey Viking Games for a while was pretty consistently putting a sale up at least every other week, right? And that is probably the most robust secondary market we've seen, right? But I mean, we haven't seen them post in how long now? Like,
yeah, that was my favorite place to pick up $10, $20 decks, no doubt.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it doesn't even actually matter that much, like, because the game is scaled to the number of players that it has.
Right.
So like that's the amount of stuff you have available to you if you are a player at whether it's tournaments or card pool or Discord community, or not to say that we're bad at any things, we're just small.
Right.
And again, I'm not even sure that the secondary market for this game realistically ever exists, just because of the nature of the game. Like, when you think about how the game works, like there will be a secondary market, and the secondary market will be, again, exactly what you just did, where you as a top player are going to look at a pile of decks that you have collected over however many hours or dollars or whatever metric you want to measure it by, and you're going to say, okay, well, I only really care about these ones, and it's 10%, 20% of your pile. And that's not to say those are all competitive either. Like, it might just be ones that you think are fun. That's kind of one issue that I've been having lately with the game is like, I want to play cards for fun, but I don't even own any decks that have the cards I think are fun and I want to play with.
Oh no.
Like, I mean, I have some competitive decks and I still just like play the same thing a lot because those are the decks that I own. But like I want to find some cool
one thing I'll say about kind of what you're saying is that you think there's a lot of competitive players scraping their collection, and so the stuff that's hitting the secondary market isn't good. I
wasn't going to say that it isn't good. I just was going to say that it's not like an upgrade to where, like, for people that want to get into the game at the like beginning of their tournament career level, it's great. I'm sure that like there are a bunch of decks in the 500 you sold or whatever it was that are a big upgrade for a large amount of the current audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's good. I think that's positive. It doesn't change the deck availability for people that want to go like to Worlds or whatever.
Right.
It does change the deck availability for the potential of adding, like having again or doubling the number of people that go to a UC.
Yeah.
Like that's like the level of decks you're probably selling, right? Like
Yeah, and I think, like you said before, that this is all comparative to the community we have, right? Because Core and I tried selling our decks before Worlds, and honestly, I think that it was a pretty fair price, but there was no takers, and those I think were world-class decks.
yeah, I mean, they definitely are. Like, I would 100% agree with that.
But it's just the size of the community makes that not, happen very often. And then when it does happen, they're not bought, so then it doesn't incentivize anyone else to sell their decks that they know are worth a set amount of money and aren't really worth letting them go for less,
Yeah,
I mean, there'll never the best part about secondary market for card games is that there is more than one market, and you get competition that forces like a lowering in price variance. Like you have to compete with someone else selling a similar product, so you can't just say like this is a $7,000 deck, take it or leave it. And that's just not happening again because of the size of the community. And
well, so again, I want to convert back, because obviously we can't change community size, but what we can do is work to try to make the competitive game more accessible. And the way I think best of three actually potentially makes it less accessible is what I was leading down with this.
I disagree.
Okay.
And this is the reason why. We only have control over a certain number of things. Like you said just now, we don't have control over community size. Right?
Well, I think we do have some control over community size. I want to be clear. I think the ability to create more events, whether that's at a local level in person or whether that's online, and Stoneblade's willingness to allow us to make sanctioned events like silver events and such, like we really do have the opportunity to create as many different ways as functionally possible as a community of players for anybody to get involved at an organized play level. I think that has the opportunity to allow Soulforge to grow. I want to be clear about that.
Yeah, I don't think any of us would be here having this discussion if we didn't think the game had a future. Right? Like,
sure, maybe
under the assumption that the game is like going to continue to be a game, which I mean, I wouldn't be doing the pod if I didn't think the game was going to continue to be a game. Like, if I didn't think the game had the potential to continue to grow. Like, when we're talking about making a fair like match experience, like excluding all the other stuff that we've talked about, all the infrastructure stuff, all the deck collection stuff, like just when you sit down at a table, how do you make the match the most fair? Well, best of three adds less variance.
Correct. I agree.
And so that increases to like of three things that we take into account. We're talking about like sitting down and playing a match with an opponent. One of them is variance. I think essentially everyone thinks that that's negative, right? Like I think that it is positive to a certain extent. You wouldn't play card games if you didn't enjoy some randomness. You'd play chess.
Right.
But like this game has a ton of variance, like way more variance than any other card game I've ever played, because you just get a random 5 every turn. You can't even like plan play lines ahead because you just discard the cards you see and don't play. So you can like plan like a tiny bit because you know the cards in your pile, but you don't know what order you're going to draw them in, or like same with your opponent. You know your opponent's cards, but you don't know what order they're going to draw them in. So you can make some plays around things, but it's not as meaningful as it is in other games where, you know, your opponent plays in a certain way and you're like, sure, they have a counter spell or whatever.
Sure.
One thing I kind of want to... Oh, sorry.
Yeah, just to finish that up, the two other things besides variance that this affects are play skill and deck quality.
Correct.
And so we want to incentivize play skill. This is a way to do that by decreasing variance. And deck quality, I think this, like, if Soulforge is going to succeed as a game, we want to encourage like players to have the best possible deck. Even if that sounds like negative, that they have to spend a bunch of money or they have to work really hard, like Soulforge is a game built around these like random piles that they want you to buy out of the lottery. And that's like what the game is. That's part of the game. And so
do you agree though that deck quality has an impact on game variance?
I assume the higher the quality deck, the lower the variance.
Correct. So if we reduce variance by a best of 3, how does that not inversely affect the deck quality requirement?
Well, what I'm trying to tell you is that the deck quality requirement is a good thing.
I'm not arguing it's not. I'm saying though that it makes it less accessible. It makes the game less accessible.
That's kind of where I wanted to bring this back to. And so in the heart of the conversation, and I kind of went back to like the UC at Gamehole Con and then your guys' invitational. That conversation that Corey and I were talking about is a very small subset of the games in Soulforge. That's competitive Soulforge. I don't think you want to make competitive Soulforge extremely accessible because the storyline events, because the sealed, those are your accessible formats, and that's where people are going to go to enjoy the game. That's where you're going to step your toes in. I don't want to watch the Super Bowl and think that I can play in the Super Bowl, right? That should be simply the best of the best, where we try to remove the most variance. We see the player skills shine. I want to watch that on your guys' stream and know that I'm watching the best players compete with the best decks. I don't want it to be accessible. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. And I don't think
that was a better way to try to make the point that I was trying to make.
I don't think I'm trying to say I want to specifically talk about the Super Bowl, i.e. World Championship or whatever, as not being that. And so I do think that there may be a space for that. But I do worry that even at a bronze level type event where you're trying to get, a deck leveled up or whatever, as long as we stay in this current ecosystem, the deck quality in a best of 3 format at even a bronze level, like casual tournament event, is going to be, it's gonna raise the barrier of entry to the point where I worry that players will just go, I just don't have a deck good enough to compete there. Right.
Well, and that's kind of the beautiful thing, right? This conversation, in theory, we're kind of building the ship as we fly. I agree with you. Bronze doesn't need to be best of 3. That could be the best of 1 format where we kind of gnash our teeth against each other and level these decks up. And there's a tier somewhere, and if we call it silver, we call it silver. If we call it gold, it's gold. Right. I'm not sure, but yeah, I agree with you that there's a point where we separate competitive from not competitive, and we just make that clear line. But as a community, and especially you guys, honestly, I think you guys, I would say Nathas's events, like you guys are really kind of the drivers. And even Fifth Cycle, every other tournament, they have a very competitive, every other week they have a very competitive tournament. Between those 3 entities, and there's more, I'm sorry to leave people out, but between those 3 entities.
No, it's just us. Don't include anyone else.
You guys can start to experiment and implement some of these things and say, hey, this is going to be, even though it's bronze, and take that out of it for a second, but this week's just going to be a best of 3, and let's see how it plays, get some feedback from the players, and then the next time we do a best of 2, right? That's a format that has potential, and the only reason I think of best of 2 is because I look at the Shufflebus Invitational, and Eli lost a best of 2 because he won the first match against the player and then lost the second match against the player and didn't get to continue on. Those are the weird inconsistencies that the current framework builds. And so I'm just saying we could test that stuff out, I think, and I hope we as a community kind of take charge and do that, and then let Stoneblade use it as data.
So Nathis is adding to this conversation that, for some perspective, for players to be successful in other games, they usually need to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to have a deck that, or hundreds to thousands of dollars to have a deck that can do consistently well in major events. I know when I played FIB, top CC decks can easily be over 1K. Same with Magic, Modern, or Legacy. I'm gonna push back a little bit on this, Nathis, because I have played these games at super competitive levels. Yes, they can cost a lot if you're trying to build the product by opening sealed product. If you're trying to build, I just pulled up Magic standard decks because I do not know the Magic meta right now, and I don't even know if standard is the staple professional level for Magic any longer. But at one point in time, standard was a component of being a professional Magic player. So was modern, to be fair. The tier 1 decks here on this list range anywhere from $185, actually $109 at the bottom, to $546. Those are pretty accessible, and what you get a known quantity, right? You get a known thing, like you know that it fits into the meta in some capacity somewhere, and is considered a top tier list.
Right. The one issue with comparing that right now is that a secondary market does exist in that game. We were talking earlier about how because currently the secondary market for SoulForge is not player friendly, really. I mean, it's as player friendly as it's going to be for a while, just because of the size, and nobody knows what anything's worth, and there aren't people in the game that are in it for profit, because that's going to drive prices, drive competition and drive prices down if there's people out there just trying to buy and sell decks. But yeah, I mean,
correct me if
obviously,
I'm wrong, but
obviously there's it's the reason people complain about this game in that fashion is because it's a lottery, right? It's very possible that you spend $100 and you have something world class. It's very possible that you spend $10,000 and you don't,
right?
And that's a feel bad, but that's what SoulForge is. That's what I was trying to say before, and what I think Ryan put very succinctly, in that at a high level, it's not supposed to be accessible. The game is meant to be accessible to play sealed. The game is meant to be accessible to play casual. It just doesn't work like other games in that fashion. And if you're the kind of person that doesn't like that, then the game isn't for you.
Right.
And that's not I'm not telling anybody to shy away from it because of that. It's just something that you need to know going in. You can buy mid to good level decks on this what little secondary market we have now, when what Ryan put up, or what Tess used to put up. I don't know if they're still doing that, but
so here's what I'll say. I mean, because there's a lot of argument or a lot of conversation happening around this, but Nathis Madungu's added that in the competitive Magic the Gathering formats are Modern and Pioneer. He's saying Modern has an average price of 1K, Pioneer has a $400 price point. I looking at just doing quick searches, because again, I am not a Magic meta expert.
Standard has fallen out of
but
rotation, kind of.
You have an entry-level Tier 1 list that is represented 615 times on this list. It's called Is It Phoenix and Pioneer. That's got a secondary market value of $265. If I was going to start playing Magic again, and I would not pick Modern as my starting format point, because I know it's the most expensive, and I just wouldn't want to invest in that. Although from an investment standpoint, Modern decks are much more stable. I want to be clear about that. But you're getting into economics there, not competitive viability. When you talk about Pioneer, which is a newer format that has seemingly, I guess, taken over the Standard marketplace, what Standard was kind of intended to be at one point in time, the deck price was a value that was pretty accessible if you just wanted to play the game. $265, right, for an entry-level Tier 1 deck. The top deck, money-wise, in the format is a Rakdos mid-range, and it's $621. That's a lot of money. But to break this down into perspective, my 250 deck collection, if I divide that by 4, because you get 4 decks per box, and if you paid retail for that, it's $1,561 invested. I know I've spent more than that, because many of my decks I've purchased secondary market for well over the $6 a deck that it would normally be. So I've already got at a fundamental base level, I've already got a $1,500 plus investment in this game to have 250 decks. I mean, obviously that number goes up much more substantially, and I would tell you that outstrips any trading card game on the market. Period. Now, does 250 decks mean I have a competitively viable deck that I can compete with at Worlds? Me personally, I don't feel like that. I don't feel like my collection has that. I know that you can high roll that. Like, I know that some players can high roll in that 250 deck collection.
Right. I mean,
but
everything you're saying is correct, but it's essentially meaningless.
Sure.
Because like that is not going to change in the game. Like
right.
that is the heart of SoulForge, right?
Right.
Like,
but I'm saying, how do you create accessibility at a constructed competitive level? Right.
You don't.
Okay.
The answer is you don't, because the game is not designed that way. That's what I'm trying to tell you. That's what Ryan was saying with like the accessibility is not important. Like people that choose to
level.
Right.
Yeah,
But like you said, we have a lot of accessibility at the casual level as well. Like we're literally going to we personally, us, are going to run a bunch of sealed events, right? Like, and so like having the same conversation that everyone has had about SoulForge since the beginning of SoulForge, like in some fashion or another, about like the cost of decks, I think is just like, I think that's doing more to hurt the accessibility of the game than the actual like accessibility problem. Because people just like bring it to light all the time.
Right.
And it's like you need to decide at some point, and this is true of every game. Like this is true of every game. You need to realize that you are not in control of what the game is. You are in control of whether or not you want to play it.
Madungu says
that was what we ran into with
Ashes. Let's just scrap this constructed business. I think that's where I'm kind of headed with it, and he's getting lots of love on that comment, by the way. I think that's
that
where
might have been me.
There's a few of them going off. It's not just you. I think there's something to this, right? I think there's something to saying, is this game even really appropriate as a competitive game? Is it really? Like, or is the best way to experience SoulForge is just exactly like you said, and that's the storyline event. Well, yeah, but this is important, right? It's important for understanding.
No, it's not. Like the thing about it is like we've said a million times in this conversation that like, and this conversation is currently happening between like me and you, who are scrubs, and Ryan, who is
not
the world's best runner-up at UCs, and like world championship Nathis and Mendungu and all the greatest player, and all they want to do is play sealed, and they all agree that the game is perfectly fine as a casual game.
Mm-hmm.
But there's also no reason to take anything away from Sam Nathison.
No, I'm not.
Who has 9,000 decks or whatever.
I'm not trying.
That's a made-up number. Yeah. Nobody throw him on blast.
Yeah.
Like,
I'm not specifically calling out anybody.
He should be rewarded.
Yeah.
Like the company likes that because he's supporting them. Like he should be rewarded for that, right? Like to a certain extent.
I agree.
So I think this goes back to, I think what it is that all of these formats exist. I don't want to sound cheesy here, but like in symphony, like they are a synergistic pairing, right? Like I want to watch the best players in the world, and I want to watch you guys stream it and commentate it, and I want to know that I'm watching the best player. And I think that happened at Worlds. Like, I want to be clear, I think that happened at Worlds, and I loved watching that match. But that's just a part of the game that I want to partake in as a spectator. And I also want to casually play and emulate some of those players through sealed, through storylines. And I think they all work together. I have the accessibility part, just limited, and the storyline, and then I have the competitive part that I, as a spectator, can partake in. And every once in a while, I have some decks I'll dip my toes in and play as well. Because if you took constructed away, someday I'll miss it. Maybe right now I don't, but someday I would.
Yeah.
Right. What you've said is you look at the game as someone should look at the game and should look at any game. Is you have seen the game for what it is. Like the core of the game. You've decided where your place in it is, and that's what you've stuck with, right? Like, we can spend all this time talking about what would be better or what would be worse, but we all kind of agree that, like, the game is best as a sealed game. it has some problems with like accessibility. It has the potential to be like very cool as a competitive game, but it's very expensive. And that's fine as a competitive game that it's very expensive. Like I would love to play vintage Magic all the time. Like I play with proxies, but I'm not a millionaire. So I don't own any of those cards for real. And that's I am aware that that is something that I cannot do. I enjoy watching the vintage championships and I enjoy consuming content surrounding that. But like that's just the way it is, right? Like so I admit that I was as much of a perpetrator of the this game is too expensive at the beginning as anyone, because I like made a bunch of big charts in Microsoft Paint and argued with Justice Blinded about it for 2 hours, like my first week in on Discord.
Yeah.
And that was a waste of time. Like not that I'm ever wrong, but like
well, I think
if I want to play SoulForge and if I want to cover SoulForge and I want to care about the game,
yeah,
like this is what it is.
Yeah.
And we should celebrate it. Like
I'm not.
like,
no. I'm actually saying like. I think I'm saying the same thing as you are, but then the conversation around best of 3 maybe doesn't even matter. And Ryan, I don't want to take that like as a negative. I think it's an intriguing conversation. Obviously, it sparks a ton of debate. Like we're sitting here having a debate about it. That's what we were hoping for when we brought you on tonight, was to have this debate. The question I have for it is, if SoulForge is better as the storyline game and as the sealed game, and it's worse as the constructed game. If those things are all true, right? If those are all true statements, then what is the goal for competitive SoulForge? Like what should be the goal?
I would say those are not true statements, because we agree, and because a lot of the online community agrees, that doesn't make it true.
Sure.
We don't dictate that. Competitive SoulForge should be a thing, whether that's our preferred playstyle or not. And best of 3 makes it so that we get to see the most competitive players play against each other, is my opinion. Now, just because we would rather go off and play storyline, that's cool, but that competitive needs to be there, and the best of 3 is the best format for it to be the most competitive.
Okay, so
I think I agree with all of that. The best of 3 thing, like I said, decreases variance, so I assume that increases the need for player skill, and obviously, additionally, like player skill and deck quality are essentially the same thing in this game. Like they're not literally the same thing, but they're like when one goes up, the other goes up almost 100% of the time. At least when we're talking about trying to win. Like obviously, like Ryan's a great player, and if he wants to go play some donkey deck for fun, that's different. His play skill will still be high and the deck quality may be low. But if we're talking about going to competitive event, players like you, Ryan, or Nathis, or Mundungu, or whoever, like when they're trying to win and you push up on the player skill lever, the deck quality lever goes up with it, and vice versa, because that's the things that those people care about. And I believe that decreasing the variance lever increases both those levers together. So maybe best of 3 is good. The thing about best of 3, of course, is just the time constraint, right? So,
yeah. Well, I mean, that's the last piece. Obviously, it's the most obvious one to talk about, but I actually think that a best of 3 format can, outside of some shenanigans like Infinite Stitcher from Eli, right? Like the only player in the world that has access to that right now.
That we're aware of, yeah. That plays online.
yeah, that we're aware of. Outside of those really extreme examples like that, I think that a best of 3 actually leads us down a path that is pretty uncertain when it comes to the power of life gain. And the ability for life gain to prolong games in such a way where you don't actually ever play 3 games.
It shouldn't You're just talking about due to time constraint,
Correct.
is what you're talking.
Yeah, because there's still going to be a time
Yeah.
constraint even in a best of 3. Even if the game speeds up in app play, if you have a deck that can gain 60, 70, 80 life, it's very possible that deck could just stall you for all 40, 50 minutes of a round. And then just win on breaker.
I think it goes back to the time constraint, like you said. But one of my most competitive decks has gone over 100 health on stream competitively, and I think we could have squeezed those games in, in a 3-way, and I still lost. But it's just the time constraint. I agree with you, and that's why. Good
night, Solmir. Thanks
it's really
for joining
kind of
us.
difficult. It's just kind of difficult, and it's the only reason I brought up the best of 2 format. I honestly, I don't think that's the right answer, but if time constraint is a legitimate thing, I think you have to look at the best of 2. And that's where the community experimentation comes in, right? You play 2 matches, and if you don't finish the second one, you each get a bye, and that lowers your opponent's win percentage. So there's some built-in resistance there. Again, I don't love it, but that's the kind of experimentation we have to do.
What you were saying in your episode about it a few weeks back is, I think, correct. Like, the best of 3 format currently, like, we would never be able to do, I don't think, in our single day events, whether it's sealed or constructed either way, just due to time constraints. Like, we just wouldn't happen. However, because we do season long, and other people have similar tournament setups to us, it would potentially be possible, as long as people are willing to give up an additional hour of their time, like, to set up a best of 3 over the course of a week that they have to do it in.
Mm-hmm.
And again, this is something that Stoneblade probably cannot do in paper form at a single day event. I mean, they could if it was like a 4-person event, but if we get a 20-person event, that would be a long day.
Mm-hmm.
So for seasons, like, potentially something we could try, maybe. I would want feedback from the community, because I want them, like, I want people to, like, guarantee me that they're going to get their matches scheduled and done. If they need 2 or 3 hours, instead of just 40 minutes to an hour to schedule with one person over the course of a week. The only additional point that I did think of when I was listening to this episode, and I kind of forgot about, we were talking about other stuff tonight, is similar to what Jesse was saying. In other games, there are decks that specifically were built to go to time. And normally, like, that's okay. Except for Soulforge, because there's no draws, and the tiebreaker is life total,
Mm-hmm.
decks that are designed to go to time are potentially more sinister. I don't know what the right word is. Like, ankle shooting.
Manipulative.
Right. In this game than they are in other games, because slow play is already something that is very difficult to like, police when you have table judges. Let alone when, like, you're like, oh well, he didn't quite get all his stuff done, in the last however many minutes of the thing, but he wins because he's at 40 and I'm at 20, right? Like, that in Magic, when that happens, that game is a draw. So there's less incentive on. There is still some, and people will do, essentially, like, I don't think anybody in our community would do it, but again, as scalability happens, there's going to be angle shooters in the game, and we don't want to incentivize that. So I don't know if that's a problem for today, but it might be a problem for tomorrow.
And that's the only reason I brought up the best of 2, because I'm pretty sure it was Pocket Monsters where those decks were built to manipulate the best of 3. And that's when a large part of that community started proposing to do best of 2. And they definitely experimented with it. The Pocket Monsters in Japan stayed at best of 1. North America and everywhere else stayed at best of 3. They never changed to best of 2, but a lot of experimentation was done, and a lot of players.
Best of 2? Isn't it if you win 1, you win then?
No, if you win the first one, you play the second one, and if you win the second one, you get a point. So you get a point for every win.
Got it.
So essentially, you come out of a very good win with 2 points. If you come out with only 1 point, that means that you drew the second game or you didn't finish. There's no tiebreaker.
Yep.
It's literally you have to finish or you don't. And if you don't finish, you get a 0, no point. And then also that affects your opponent's win percentage, right? So even if you won the first one, your second opponent actually gets less points for their strength, and that's going to affect you.
It's actually really similar to best of 3, where in Magic, when you play a match best of 3, you get 3 points for a win, 1 point for a draw, 0 points for a loss.
Yep.
In this case, you get 0, 1, or 2 points. Just based on how many games you win. So it could be a 2-0, it could be a 1-0, it could be a 1-1. Mm-hmm. And it just, the points break out in a way that it's very similar to the 3-1-0 of best of 3.
Yeah,
it specifically combats going to time.
Well, certainly best of 3 has to have a point system, right? It doesn't work just to have like, essentially we're going to play best of 3 and whoever wins 2 gets X, Y,
yeah,
Z,
it's just
right?
the points are for tiebreakers.
Yeah,
right.
That's
like
100%.
Everything needs tiebreakers.
Which then, of course, you can.
It's unfortunate because they're always,
but
because tiebreakers are always stupid, and people always think tiebreakers are like way more important than they actually are.
Sure.
Because people like to, do math.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my point is, I think that. I don't think I would want to. I'm going to be really honest. This is me being selfish and saying my own personal opinion. I would not be incentivized to play in a weekly tournament that's a best of 3. And here's why. I already have a hard enough time just finding an hour to play the game in a given week. Like, my time is super tight. Now, I'm happy to play a best of 3 if the game can resolve in an hour, right? If I can resolve the match in an hour, cool, I'm in. Let's play best of 3. But if the game is going to turn into 40-ish minutes a game, and you're going to be looking at 120 minutes or 2 hours, across an aggregate sum, meaning that, some games are going to be faster than that, but the average is going to be 120 minutes for best of 3, then I'm out. Like, you're not going to keep me. And the reason is because I don't have time to commit, even in a weekly setting, let alone a date, like a single day event where every Swiss round is 2 hours. Right, you can't do that. Like, it's just not going to work. It's too time constrained.
Right, I'm exactly on board with you, and that's I would only do those types of events for the competitive. Let's say the Shufflebus Invitational was a league that was best of 3. I would have to know that I'm setting aside 2.5 hours every week to play in a premier competitive SoulForge event. I agree on it. Any given weekly, I probably would have a hard time investing that amount of time sometimes.
And Madung is adding, maybe we should wait for the app to try best 3. Yeah, I think the app is going to make it possible, but this is the problem. If the app makes it possible, it's still not possible in a physical, right? Like, the lowest common denominator, if you want to have consistency in your organized play across all facets of SoulForge, whether it's digital or physical, is that the game plays with the same rule set, regardless of what medium you use to play it.
Well, using Magic as an example, that's no longer true.
Maybe not, but I don't think that's right. I mean, I'm just saying, like, I think that if you want to have a system where, deck levels matter, if that is part of your plan and your goal, it should not be easier in one place or the other to make that happen. Right, like,
I agree with that.
Okay, so what I'm saying is like, in Magic, players, maybe it is different in physical and digital. I don't even know how, but and I obviously don't want to get into that discussion here. The main thing is the what's the word I'm looking for? It's not consistency. It's the it's just the constitution of it all. That's not even the right word, but it's like I want there to be a level set field for all aspects of SoulForge organized play, right? Like, I want that to be a thing. So,
Well,
yeah, consistency is fine. It's a fine word for it. It needs to be consistent across all formats.
right, you have to have a level set expectation, but when you step from digital to physical, because you bring that up, I guess I will throw a plug out there. Our video that Core and I did that's going to drop here this Friday talks about potential inconsistencies between digital and physical. That currently right now there might be differences when you play on the app and when you play physical. So we kind of talk about that a little bit. That standard could be already deviating.
I mean,
So
it's very
it's
possible.
very interesting.
I just don't know what that looks like or how that actually works out in practice, and whether it's healthy for the competitive scene. But
Yeah, I share your concerns.
yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah. So, I mean, obviously we're over time. I don't want to keep you any longer. I asked you for an hour tonight, Ryan, and you've been gracious enough to give us an hour and 15 minutes at this point. So I appreciate that. I think the obvious takeaways from this discussion is that there's interest in improvements to the organized play format, and including a best of three consideration for that, and also for some modification / removal of some of the deck leveling stuff that's happening right now and how that impacts the way tournaments are organized today. I think we share the same agreement on that. I don't think that Neil or I have differing opinions on that. I think for me, a measure of success for a game, this is my final thought, a measure of success for a game is how healthy its competitive organized play looks like. I think it's the first thing that people are going to gravitate towards when they get started in a new game. Is they're going to want to see the games played at the highest levels. And I mean, absolutely zero offense to anybody, but a 4-player Ultimate Championship sets a visual / psychological impact that the game is not in a good spot. And I think the only way you can make this game grow is to grow the organized play to a way that when new players come in, they've got something they can look forward to. And reduction of accessibility, whether it's perceived or not, is a huge issue in that, whether it matters or not, it's a perception. It's a psychology basis. It's not the actual process of spending money. It's the psychology behind it. And so I think making tournaments, even at the highest levels, have even one variable of that deck quality have to go up, even if it's 1 or 2%, right? Which would be like one more card in a deck, essentially. I mean, that's even bigger than that, but because that's a 5% gain. But let's just say 5% because that's the minimum it could be. Has a big impact on accessibility to a casual player who's playing maybe in the storyline events, playing in the sealed events, and says, you know what, I want to try to be competitive, and they enter their first competitive event with their best deck, and they're 50 decks deep, and that deck just absolutely has no chance to compete in a best of 3 because the deck that's 55% against the field of competitive decks is going to be 65% or better against a non-competitive deck, especially in a best of 3 format. It just is. And that's my only concern. That's the only thing I'll say about it. As for me, that goal is how do we grow the organized play so that the game looks healthier perspective-wise. And that's all I was really trying to argue in that whole point. And I think it got lost in the shuffle a little bit more about the ins and outs of it all.
Yeah, and I think that's maybe the root of anything we've said here today that we do have a disagreement on. Because I wouldn't expect it to play Magic the Gathering limited, casual event, look over and see the top players in the world, and then, next week go sit with them and have a chance.
Sure.
But
But
I agree.
you wouldn't have
perception is reality.
Yeah, but in Magic, you wouldn't have a chance from a skill perspective, but you would have a chance in terms of you can mimic their deck 100%. You could make the investment to have their exact same deck, and you would lose strictly on the skill variance alone. I agree with that 100%.
That is a good point. Yeah, absolutely.
Of course, that's Shuffle. I see what you did there. That's funny. Yeah, I mean, so that's my only final takeaway on it. If you guys want to add any final of your takeaways from tonight's conversation, let's do that quick, and then we'll wrap up the show for tonight.
I guess I would just want to, kind of reiterate to anyone out there that's listening, we're having these conversations, and we're very invested and spirited about this game. Honestly, I love this game. Every time I can think about not playing it, I play a game, and then I'm just rejuvenated. And so we're when I'm talking about this game and this whole topic, it's purely from the competitive perspective. If you don't play this game and you're watching this and you're thinking about playing it, this game is amazing to enjoy at the casual level. It's amazing to enjoy the storyline events, and sealed is my preferred format. Again, I love playing the game that way. So don't think that because we are getting into this topic so heavily, so deeply, and we're trying to be exclusive, that doesn't mean this community isn't inclusive.
Right.
And it is an amazing community to join. It's an amazing game to play. I throw out the challenge, throw some digital cards on the table or some physical if you can, and give it a try. And I think you'll love the game. So I just kind of want to throw that out there towards the end here. And then lastly, I just want to say, hey, thanks for inviting me on. I love having good conversations with you guys. Really, some of the drivers of this community, and they're innovators. So thanks.
Well, we think the same for you. I mean, at the end of the day, I mean, honestly, we look up to the content that you and Greg put out, and you guys are just killing it over there. So continue that. I'm so glad you're back making content, because I know there was a period of time in there where you sort of stepped away from it, and those things happen. But I'm so excited you guys are back doing regular content, because it's awesome, and I watch every episode. So, Neil, you got any final thoughts?
No, I mean nothing that we haven't already
Beating the dead horse on
and buried 8 feet underground.
Fair enough. That's perfect.
This is gonna be like the conversation that exists. Like, I hope we have the same conversation 10 years from now.
Yeah.
Right. Like it just is, right. This is what the game is. We're always gonna have this conversation. It will continue to be this conversation for as long as the game exists in its current state. And all the things that Ryan said, like, just, balance it out, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's no perfect game.
No.
And specifically, like, internet communities tend to be very negative.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't want to be negative, but you also, like, should be critical.
Right.
And you should be honest. And that's, like, the goal, right? So, the things that are negative, I think, are outweighed by the positives, and hopefully we will continue to have this conversation for a long time, because as soon as they, like, if they would ever, quote unquote, fix a deck accessibility problem, the game would not be the same game.
No, I understand. So, I understand. So again, yeah,
I think people should come out and play it and enjoy it, and hopefully we will.
I'm with you. Like, I have never had more fun in a game in the last 20 years of playing competitive card games than I have in a Soulforge storyline event. I mean, it's just an absolute riot. And I tell everybody, like, go buy a booster kit and play a storyline event. It does not matter. Just go have fun with it, because there's no deterministic outcome that matters on that, right? You don't have to be competitive to enjoy the game at that level. And you can be competitive and enjoy the game at that level. So I think it's amazing. And Sealed is equally as good. And I think Sealed is a very natural progression path in this kind of game to building a collection. So at least you get something enjoyable. Like, just cracking Sealed product for me is like, it's no fun, because I'm just like, oh, well, there's X number of decks,
I'll stop you there, because cracking Sealed product for any game should be no fun for anyone. And as soon as it stops being fun for anyone, everything will be much cheaper.
Well, that's true.
In every game, like, not just this one.
That's true.
Like,
that's true.
Everybody just loves cracking packs. Stop it.
Yeah,
like,
that's true. That's true.
Play some drafts.
Yeah, my bad.
It's true.
I don't care. So, I don't care if you like Magic or FAB or whatever. Like, just stop cracking packs. You're just promoting
Gambling.
big cardboard.
Yep. Big cardboard. They're like big pharma. You got to watch out
Yeah.
for these big cardboards.
They're worse than big pharma.
Oh, I don't know, man. That's a whole nother topic. We'd have to.
I thought I was killing kids in 2006 when I was working in Hobbytown, selling them booster packs of Magic for $4.99 that we bought at $2.99.
Right.
That pack of Magic's like $7 now.
I know, it's insane. Okay, well, we're gonna wrap up the show. Obviously, this is the last show of the year, so we just want to wish you and all of your family a happy holidays, a safe holidays if you're traveling, healthy holidays, and obviously a fantastic start to the new year. We will return on the first Wednesday. I actually haven't even looked at the calendar. That's how far out that is. So hold on one second.
You're assuming that I'm going to survive to 2024.
That
would be the.
I mean, I don't even know how to take
the
that.
third.
Yeah, the 3rd. We will return the 3rd of January. We'll have lots of news to unpack on that 3rd show, like our organized play plan for 2024, and what we're going to be doing on this channel as we go forward for SoulForge. So, but we want to thank you all for just a fantastic year. I mean, it has been incredible. Well, the support we've had from the community. From fellow content creators like the Creeches. I mean, it's just been awesome. So I just thank you all from the bottom of my heart.
We've covered a few games doing this for a while, and this community has been the most fun for sure.
Oh yeah, without a doubt.
Like I love Dan and those guys from Transformers, but like that was about it.
Yeah.
And this whole community has been great and fun to work with and hang out with and play games with. So,
agreed. And
I'm happy holidays. And
and if you see me around online or you put out an LFG, I might be playing a few games of SoulForge. I definitely am going to try to sneak a few in over the holidays here. So just be on the lookout, and I'm happy to play a game with you. No stream, just hanging out, chill, casual games. That's what I'm planning to do with my time off over the next month. So. Ryan, in case we don't talk to you before the holidays, happy holidays to you and your family, and thank you again for spending time with us tonight.
Hey, you as well, my friends.
All right. Take care, everybody. Good night. Happy holidays.